Not everyone always wants to read a super long chunk of a book. That's why in today's video I want to recommend some of the shorter reads that I personally really enjoyed. To start off this video, we will start with the shortest read on this list, and it is Thornedge by T. Kingfisher. At only 116 pages. Some might say that this is a too short book, but I feel like for the story that it tells, it is really enough. Thornedge is actually a different take on Sleeping Beauty, from a totally different perspective, but still keeping some of the main elements that we're familiar with. I personally really enjoyed this book, and it's one of my favorite reads of this year without a doubt. Do I think this book could have been longer? Yes, it could have been, but is it very sufficient for the story that she wanted to tell? Absolutely. So if you haven't picked it up yet, Thornedge is a really good recommendation. I finished this in one sitting because it is only a little bit over 100 pages, and 100 pages is on average what I read in about a day, so I feel like this was a very good book. The next book on my list is also a T. Kingfisher book, and it is Nettle and Bone. In Nettle and Bone, we follow the main character who is trying to set free her sister, who is married to a king but is kind of forced into this marriage, and she wants her sister to be free, and in order to do that, she has found the help of a bone witch. To convince this bone witch to help her, she has to complete 3 impossible tasks, or seemingly impossible tasks, and then they set on this adventure to see how they can help her sister and help the kingdom as well. This is also a darker fantasy book. It isn't happy, happy, joy, joy like some fantasy books are, or the way that some people perceive fantasy as being. And I remember when reading this that it was also a fast read, and I think I finished it in 3 days. So if that's an indication of reading a few hours every evening, about 100 pages a day, that is kind of the indication that you can get. The next book comes in at 248 pages, and it is Stardust by Neil Gaiman. Now I have to admit that it has been a long while since I read Stardust, however I've seen the movie again a few years ago. What I remember from Stardust, it is a very sweet romantasy novel, and I personally really enjoy Neil Gaiman's writing style, hence the name of this channel, Tales of Neverwhere. So if you haven't read anything by Neil Gaiman yet, Stardust talks about a star falling from the sky, discovering what the star is and the history around it, etc. I think it was a very sweet fantasy novel, and if you haven't read anything Neil Gaiman yet, I would highly give this a go, as it is a short start to what he writes, and it is also one of the less childish books by Neil Gaiman that I personally enjoyed. The next book on my list at 296 pages is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. In this book we follow an orc that no longer wants to fight battles, but that starts her own coffee shop, and we follow along how this goes, the struggles she encounters, etc. This is a high fantasy book with low stakes. It's really a cozy fantasy read, and I really loved it, and I already have book 2, which is Bookshops and Bonus. It's a little bit longer. I'm also ready to read. It's also not a super long book, and I feel this is like the perfect book to just chill, sit down and read with. And this book is equally responsible for my current obsession with cinnamon rolls. The last book under 300 pages is at 298 pages, and it is The Book Eaters by Sunyi Dean. This book talks about a type of people that live along the normal society that consume books to survive. I personally haven't finished this book yet, so I cannot tell you if it is a good book or not. I DNF'd it at around 30% as I wasn't able to fully get into it. However, I do plan on picking it up again somewhere in the near future, because I did hear a lot of good things about this book. However, at the moment that I started reading it, it really didn't click with me, but maybe later this year or early next year it will. And when I do, I will of course leave an in-depth review about it. Up next at 304 pages is Book of Night by Holly Black, a book that I haven't read yet, but that is on my bookshelf, hence why I wanted to include it. And Book of Night is the adult debut of Holly Black, a modern dark fantasy of betrayals, cabals, and a dissolute thief of shadows in the vein of Neil Gaiman and Erin Morgenstern. Up next is Godkiller by Hannah Kaner. This is also a book that finishes at 304 pages. This actually felt like a short read because it was a very fast-paced book and it was descriptive without being overly descriptive, and I'm very happy that there is a book 2 coming out somewhere next year. In Godkiller, we follow a godkiller, a person who actually kills gods in a world where gods are very, very present. Every god that has his own little shrine or altar actually lives in this world, and you have bigger gods and smaller gods. Together with the god killer, we also follow a second character who actually is tied to a god. We don't know why at the end of book 1, we just know that it is, and that they cannot simply be torn away from each other because both of them experience a lot of hurt whenever they're pulled apart for longer times or for longer distances. So in this book, we follow the intrigue of what the God Killer does, what's going on in this world. There are battles happening, there's wars happening, and everything that goes on with the gods. I personally really like this book. This is really like high fantasy with a lot of gods involved. I personally really enjoy this and could highly recommend it because, let's face it, only 4 pages is not that much extra. Up next, I have another Kingfisher book that I haven't read yet, but the reason it's on this list is because I want to motivate myself to read it fairly quickly, and it is A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. At only 308 pages, I also think this falls within the short book category, and I will quickly read the back of the book for you so you know if it's for you or not. 14-year-old Mona isn't like the wizards charged with defending the city. She can't control lightning or speak to water. Her familiar is a sourdough starter and her magic only works on bread. She has a comfortable life in her aunt's bakery, making gingerbread men dance. But Mona's life is turned upside down when she finds a dead body on the bakery floor. An assassin is stalking the streets of Mona City, preying on magic folk. And it appears that Mona is his next target. And in an embattled city suddenly bereft of wizards, the assassin may be the least of Mona's worries. And if you've seen the cover art, I really love it. It reminds me of Shrek's Gingerbread Man, and I'm really excited to soon read this. Up next, at only 325 pages, is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. As I probably have mentioned before in other videos, this is the book that I hoped that Fantastic Beasts would have been, but wasn't. In Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, we follow the main character Emily Wilde as she goes to a particular part of the world to discover and write down more on our research on the particular types of fairies that live there. This was such a good book, and there is a second book coming out next year, Emily Wilde's Map of the Other Lands, and I truly hope it is as good as book 1, but at only 325 pages, this is also a very short read, and I personally felt like it's one of my favorite books of more lighter fantasy, even if it isn't super light, because a lot of dark things happen with the fairies as well, but I felt like this is a very light read for me. So these are books that I personally feel are short reads that you could finish in only a few days. Some of them you can even finish in a day. For example, Thornedge is really short. And I would of course love to know what other books would you recommend that are also under or around 300 pages, because I always love reading shorter books in between heavy reads, and I would love to get to know more books, of course. All of the books that I mentioned in this video can be found in the description box down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon with a new video. Bye! And if you haven't seen her yet, this is Luna, and if you hear kitten noises around me whenever I'm recording videos, it's probably her, because she is my little black ball of mischief, and I love her so much.